Onto your headphones and pour your favorite beverage. It's time for the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, fresh off the sidelines, your host, Matt McPeak.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? Welcome to episode IDP. I'm joined by my boy Rob Oslinker, who is a fellow IDP player. We've been playing in my all IDP league for 5 years now. This is a very unique league. Some people that I tell about, they're like, you're crazy, man. But I have a lot of fun playing in it. Rob, I know you have fun playing in the IDP. How do you feel about IDP?
Absolutely, man. It is a lot of fun. Defense wins championships, and you can just, if you follow the NFL as closely as you and I, you know who the studs on defense are, and you know which ones are going to rack up the stats, which will lead to winning games.
Hell yeah. We're both big Jet fans. We went through those few years with Rex Ryan where we had the number one defense in the league, and that's really when I started thinking about doing this all IDP league. But we're going to talk more in reference to normal fantasy leagues that just have, let's say 2 IDP spots for each position level. So you think 2 defensive line spots, 2 linebacker spots, 2 defensive back spots. The scoring is really going to make a big difference in the rankings of the players and which players you should take before others. So make sure you check out the IDP scoring for a league. That if you're in a league and you're contemplating going to IDP, or you've been in this IDP league for years, always make sure you check out that scoring. Speaking of scoring, the ESPN default IDP scoring, I'm not too crazy about. After the first year of our all IDP league, I decided I wanted to make some changes to it. So one of the first scoring changes I made was to tackles for loss, or stuffs, as ESPN calls them. Their standard league, or their default scoring is 2 points for a tackle for a loss, and for a sack, it is 4 points. So a tackle for a loss is essentially the same exact thing as a sack, except the sack involves a quarterback, or a stuff involves a running back, a wide receiver, or a tight end. To me, there's no reason why a sack should be worth 4 points and a tackle for a loss should only be worth 2. When the result of the play is the same thing, why does it matter what position the player is that gets tackled for the loss? In my opinion, it should be the same thing. If Taysom Hill gets a carry and gets tackled for a loss, is that a sack because he's technically a quarterback? Is it supposed to be worth more because he's technically a quarterback? I don't necessarily agree with that. So in our league, I made both sacks and tackles for a loss worth 3 points. So a half sack is worth 1.5 points. Another ESPN default scoring that bugged me was how a pass defensed is worth the same as a solo tackle. When a pass defensed is the result in the play is no gain. If a running back gets the ball and rushes for 10 yards and gets tackled, the tackler gets 1.5 points. If the quarterback throws a pass to a wide receiver and the cornerback bats it down, the result of the play is no gain by the offense. So why is a tackle that gives up 10 yards worth more than, or worth the same as a play in which results in no gain? I didn't agree with that, so I made passes defense worth a little bit more. And the last one was the change to safety. So they have safeties worth only 2 points to IDP players. Now, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but besides scoring a touchdown, is a safety not the best thing that an IDP player could possibly do?
It is. Besides scoring a touchdown, it is the best thing that a defensive player can do.
So which is why I decided that it should be worth 5 points, which is the same as an interception. So, a guy, makes an interception and gets tackled right at the same spot. That's worth 5 points, but a dude gets a safety and it's worth the same, or it's only worth 2 points, no shot. So I made safeties worth more. Try and give those safeties, they only happen every once in a while, so why not make them a big play like they are in a real football game, make them worth more. So those are the three basic rule changes I made to our IDP, our all IDP league, which the roster is you start 1 defensive tackle, 2 defensive ends, 2 linebackers, 2 corners, 2 safeties, and then a defensive back. So basically a corner safety flex. But one of the things that I learned from playing IDP now, with the defensive line in particular, is defensive tackles usually are nowhere near as productive as defensive ends. Obviously, Aaron Donald is a standout, but if you have 2 defensive line spots, I would try and get 2 defensive ends. 2017, only 1 defensive tackle finished in the top 12. It was Aaron Donald, and there was only 4 other defensive tackles in the top 24, and they were number 19, 21, 23, and 24. So they were all at the back half of that number 2 defensive line spot. 2018, only 3 defensive tackles in the top 12. Aaron Donald was number 1 overall that year. And then last year, 2019, only 2 defensive tackles in the top 12. So they just don't really, pan out as much as the defensive ends do, which is why I would strongly suggest you go after defensive ends if you have a defensive line spot in IDP. If your league separates it out to a 1 tackle and 1 end, then that's different. But if you have just defensive line spots, I would go with defensive ends. Rob, would you agree with that?
I would. The defensive ends, they tend to be more versatile. Get you some more points through stats through the sack, because they tend to compile more sacks than traditional defensive tackles. So with that considered, they're more lucrative in terms of draft position, and they also tend to get more pass deflections at the line of scrimmage as well. So
right.
I do agree.
Yeah, in the last 3 seasons, we've had an average of between 5 and 6 defensive linemen in the top 24 defensive tackle positions. So that's about 20%. So I'd much rather shoot for the DNs that, and hope to catch one of those other 80% of the defensive linemen that finish in the top 24. But if you have to take a defensive lineman, Aaron Donald is by far and away the safest. I would take the only defensive lineman I would take above him would be Daniil Hunter and the Bosa brothers if I had to play a specific defensive tackle. The other 2 safe defensive linemen, or defensive tackles, that is, are DeForest Buckner and Grady Jarrett. But again, go for those defensive ends. And then another discrepancy amongst linebackers that's big to me is whether the player is a middle linebacker or if he's an outside linebacker, and especially if he's an outside linebacker in a 3-4. So I would much rather go for those middle linebackers, those dudes that are on the field for 3-down linebackers. They tend to fill up the entire stat sheet. They're not super reliant on sacks as much as the edge rushers generally are. So you're talking about guys like Shaq Thompson, T.J. Watt, Chandler Jones, Khalil Mack, Shaquille Barrett, who had the most sacks in the league last year, and Von Miller, who's been a defensive player of the year. These dudes on the edge, they are extremely impactful to the game, but they just if they don't hit on those sack numbers, it's really hard for them to rack up as many points as the middle linebackers do. So keep that in mind when we talk about linebackers. Let's start by talking about the defensive linemen here. So the linemen had the biggest drop off in average fantasy points per game from the number 1 guy to the number 24 guy last year. With 5.1 points as a drop-off in difference from that number 1 to 24. When looking at defensive ends, you want guys that set the edge and they've proven the ability to play versus the run so that they stay on the field for not just first and second down, but obviously also third down when they can rush the passer and rack up those sack numbers. I don't want to say sacks are fluky, but the defensive linemen the defensive line in general is kind of the position's always in flux. You generally don't see the same guys in the top 10 every year, besides obviously, TJ Watt or JJ Watt and Aaron Donald when they're on fire. But yeah, let's get into defensive end. So Daniil Hunter, in the last 2 seasons, Hunter finished as the number 1 defensive lineman in 2019 and the number 3 in 2018. He finished with almost 17 more points than the number 2 guy last year. So he was by far and away the best defensive end, the best defensive lineman in football. He's averaged 11 sacks a year in his last 5 years. So now with the Vikings defensive backfield looking like it might be one of the youngest in the league, that doesn't really bode well for Hunter. So I'm not really going to take him as the top guy unless he falls to maybe the 3rd or 4th defensive end available. Then maybe I'll go after him. Then you got the Bosa brothers. So Joey Bosa, he's my number 1 defensive lineman, not only because of his 2 top 5 finishes in the last 3 years, with the 3rd year him only playing in 7 games because of injury, but the Chargers defense is going to be stacked this year, especially among the defensive backs. The defensive backs and the pass rushers have a positive correlation where if the coverage is better, then the pass rushers have more time to get to the quarterback, and the Chargers could have one of the best groups of coverage guys in the league with Darwin James, Casey Hayward, Chris Harris, Desmond King. So I really like Joey Bosa this year. His brother, Nick Bosa, he had 9 sacks and 15 tackles for a loss in his rookie year in only 14 games last year. He also had an interception and defended 2 passes, so he's not just a pass rusher. He gets his hand on some of those passes, like you were saying, Rob. We got Myles Garrett. He was a 1st overall pick for a reason 3 years ago. He's a freak of an athlete. When he's not ripping dudes' helmets off, he's a great football player. Double-digit tackles for loss and sacks over the past 2 years, despite only having played 10 games last year. If Garrett can stay on the field, if he can stay healthy, he could have a breakout year this year. And then the next guy that's in kind of this top 4 bracket is Aaron Donald. Yes, defensive lineman. 6 years in the league, 6 Pro Bowls, 5 All-Pro. He's already got 72 career sacks, including a 20.5 sack year in 2018. He's been called the most disruptive player in football by some coaches. Like I said, although generally defensive ends are better defensive linemen in IDP leagues, Aaron Donald is just on another level. So that to me is kind of the top of the top. That's like the cream of the crop right there. If you can get any one of those 4 guys, you should be in a pretty good spot. All right, then moving on to a couple older guys that are kind of still holding it down on the defensive line. We got J.J. Watt. Him and Lawrence Taylor are the only players to win Defensive Player of the Year 3 times. He's got 158 tackles for a loss and 96 sacks in only 112 career games. He's also caught 3 touchdowns in his career, so he could also possibly get you some points from offense. He's only played 16 games once in the last 4 years, though, so that injury concern is kind of holding him back, and that's probably why I would avoid him. You got Cameron Jordan. He's played in all 16 games in all 9 years of his career. He averaged just under 10 sacks and 13 tackles for a loss last season. You can't really get any more consistent than Cam Jordan. You got Cameron Hayward with Pittsburgh. I usually try and stay away from the defensive ends that play in the base 3-4. I feel like they kind of get washed out. I feel like the outside linebackers in the 3-4 generally end up seeing more of the sack production, but Cam Hayward's numbers speak for themselves. 3rd most fantasy points among defensive linemen last year. He had the 8th most in 2017 and in only 15 games. And he might benefit the most from having the presence of TJ Watt on the other side. Couple more older guys. Calais Campbell was the rock of that really good defensive team in Jacksonville the past few years, but he's now in Baltimore. He was brought there to help fix the run defense that was horrible last year, so he should see plenty of opportunities to rack up some tackles. He matched his career high in solo tackles 2 years ago, so I don't think his age has really gotten to him yet. I think he's got another year or 2 in him. And then Carlos Dunlap, he had 7th most fantasy points among defensive linemen last year, but he missed 2 games. So if he had played in those 2 games, he probably would have finished in the top 3. He's going into his 11th season, yet last year he had his 2nd highest total tackle number of his career, so he's another guy that's not really falling off. So Rob, you got anything you want to say about any of those guys that I've mentioned so far? Any of those guys that have been on your teams in the past that have kind of stuck out to you?
Maybe not guys that have been on my teams in the past, but I did make a note to look out for Nick Bosa. this year in San Francisco. He's coming off a fantastic rookie year. As you mentioned, he only played in 14 games last year, and he had 9 sacks and 15 tackles for loss, as well as an interception and a couple pass defenses as well. He's just for someone to come into the NFL first year and make that kind of impact, I'm really excited to see what he could do. Another, full off season of training underneath his belt going into year 2, with a very, very good San Francisco defense. I'd say the stock is rising on Nick Bosa.
Hell yeah. All right. Next group of guys here, rounding out the top 12. You got Sam Hubbard. Benefits from playing with Carlos Dunlap, who we just mentioned. Last year, in his second year, he had 10 tackles for a loss with another 8.5 sacks. He should build on those numbers this year. Just got to make sure he's tagged as a defensive lineman and not a linebacker. And then we got another defensive tackle here, DeForest Buckner, the only other defensive tackle worth drafting, in my opinion, in the top 12 as far as defensive linemen go. The Colts traded for him because they think he's their next Dwight Freeney or Robert Mathis, I guess. 12 sacks in 2018 as a tackle. It's not Aaron Donald level, but it's pretty damn close. Then you got this next group of guys, Melvin Ingram, Justin Houston, Frank Clark, Yannick Ngakoue, and Trey Flowers. Vol played up to number 2 linebacker levels, number 2 defensive lineman levels, considering they're technically defensive ends. But Yannick finished 9th last year, Frank Clark 11th in 2018, and Melvin Ingram number 7 in 2017. So I'd say those 5 guys, in whatever order you want, are good candidates to finish somewhere in the 13 to 24 range. So they're safe picks. But a few guys I'm excited to get as my number 2 defensive lineman that I think can really make the jump into the number 1 is DeMarcus Lawrence. Yes, he had a down year last year. Trust me, I know. I drafted him with my second pick in our all IDP league. But in 2018, he finished number 6 among defensive linemen. In 2017, he finished 3rd. So if he can get back on track with that player that he was in those years, you could have yourself a steal if he falls. Max Crosby was the number 8 defensive lineman last year as a rookie, playing with the fellow 2019 draftee Clelin Ferrell. 10 sacks, 16 tackles for a loss. It's a pretty good starting point for a rookie. And I think Gruden and Mayock are really building something special there in Vegas. So if I have to settle for Crosby as my number 2 guy, I'm not upset about it at all. Josh Allen going into his second year in Jacksonville. Chase Young just drafted last year. And then one guy, keep in mind, Chandler Jones. If he's tagged as a defensive lineman and not as a linebacker, go out and get him. He just racks up sacks, man. He's another great pick with 14.5 sacks on average over the last 5 years. He's only missed 1 game in those 5 years. So, and then real quick, 3 more defensive tackles. If you have to play a defensive tackle, you got Grady Jarrett, 2 top 24 finishes in 2 of the last 3 years, and he would have had a 3rd if he didn't miss 2 games in 2018. Chris Jones, one of the only defensive tackles to ever get a franchise tag. And Kenny Clark finished number 24 and number 25 in the last 2 seasons. You could probably get him with your last pick in your draft and, have a solid number 2 defensive lineman. A couple wild cards on the defensive line. You got Eric Armstead with the 49ers. They just traded away DeForest Buckner. We'll see how he does being the spotlight pass rusher there. Jadeveon Clowney, a former number 1 overall pick. Clowney still doesn't have a team because of his salary cap demands, but I could see him easily finishing in the top 20 depending on what team he ends up going to. And then Dante Fowler Jr., he'll be playing for his 3rd different team in his first 5 years. So usually elite pass rushers don't get traded twice before their rookie deal runs out. So, he's kind of inconsistent. He kind of scares me, so I would be afraid of him. And then another guy real quick, Brandon Graham. Really good player, but another very inconsistent player. He's finished 16th, then 45th, and then 13th. So he kind of bounces around. So that's going to do it for the defensive linemen. Let's take a minute and look at our linebackers. Probably the most important position for IDP. Like we were saying, they're the guys that really rack up the most points. They really, they're on the field the most. They do the most. So Two things I kind of made up my own stats trying to get through, trying to figure out a better way to quantify all these linebackers. And so tackles per snap, to me, makes sense as far as evaluating how many tackles a player you can expect him to get if he plays a full complement of snaps. A couple guys that stood out, Darius Leonard, of course, with 0.159 tackles per snap. So basically 15% of his snaps he ends up with a tackle. And then Leighton Vander Esch, 0.163. Maybe not sounds like a lot, but it is, trust me. And then another one, so, when you look at passes defense, tackles for a loss, sacks, half sacks, forced fumbles, fumble recoveries, essentially everything that a defensive player does except for tackles and interceptions. I think interceptions are just one of the most random stats you can have. It's sometimes guys get 10 in a season, the next season they only have one. Random guys end up with 4 or 5 or maybe even 3 interceptions in a game, and then they never have one the rest of their career. So it's a very random stat. That's why I left out that, and since I already had a stat just for tackles, I left that one out. So I call this stat the aBIT. It's everything but interceptions and tackles. Wouldn't you know, Darius Leonard also leads the league in aBIT with 1.92. So basically every single game he has 1.92 of those stats. So whether it's a pass defense, a tackle for a loss, which may not sound like a lot, but when you look at it over a course of an entire season, it is. So let's look at some of these top tier linebackers. Darius Leonard, by far and away the best linebacker, the best IDP player, highest points per game among IDP players last year. He had over 110 solo tackles in 15 games as a rookie. And the season before last, then he had the highest aBIT, as I call it, amongst linebackers. He's just the man. So if you have a chance to get him, do it. Bobby Wagner, 6 straight Pro Bowls, 5 of his last have been All-Pro. He was the heart of that Seahawks Legion of Boom defense, and he still is. Blake Martinez not traded, but he gets signed by the Giants. He played in 16 games each of the last 3 years, and he averaged 95 solo tackles with 50 assisted each year. So he's a tackling machine. Jalen Smith with the Cowboys would probably have even more numbers if he didn't play with Sean Lee and Leighton Vander Esch on his team. But Smith has 15 tackles for a loss and 15 passes defensed, 7.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles in only 38 games as a pro. So he's got way more room to advance as well. You look at Corey Littleton, newly signed by the Raiders, one of only 5 linebackers to average over 14.5 fantasy points per game last year. The next one, Joe Schubert, newly signed to Jacksonville, one of only 4 linebackers to average 14.5 fantasy points. Roquan Smith, he only played 12 games last year in his sophomore season, but he was on pace for a second straight 90 solo tackle season. So this dude was a tackling machine at Georgia. I wouldn't be surprised if we finish the season and he leads the league in tackles. The guy that I mentioned earlier, Leighton Vander Esch, is one of only 4 linebackers we're going to talk about here that had over 100 solo tackles in a season, and he did it as a rookie. He also has the most tackles per snap played among all linebackers, which I found to be a crazy stat. And then you got Levante David, the only active linebacker with multiple 100-plus solo tackle seasons, which were the first 3 of his 8-year career. He's had an absurd number of tackles for loss, 116 in 121 games started. That's a ridiculous ratio. And then one last guy here, Deion Jones. There's only one other linebacker that has a higher tackle per snap that we haven't mentioned yet. Deion Jones has the highest passes defensed per snap by far. He gets his hands on a lot of passes. So, Rob, anybody in that top 10 there that you can speak to as far as having on your team in the past that has been a dominant player for you?
Yeah, well, I haven't had them on my team yet, but I've had my eye on Leighton Vander Esch over the past couple of years, and it was noticeable when he got hurt how it affected the Cowboys' defense last year. I remember, I think it was his rookie year, I texted you during a game that I was watching. I said, this Vander Esch linebacker on the Cowboys is an excellent player, because he truly is. He plays sideline to sideline. He's fast. He plays the run and the pass. I think he could be as good as Luke Kuechly. in my opinion. When I really do believe that Leighton Vander Esch is that good of a linebacker. I think he could be one of the top 5 linebackers in the game when he's on the field, because he really does have that potential.
Yeah, man. Dude, I remember I actually had Sean Lee on my team that year, his rookie year, and when you texted me that, I was like, oh, shit, I should probably, pick this guy up and play him in Sean Lee's spot. I stuck Sean Lee in my IR spot. I added Leighton Vander Esch, and he was probably the main reason why I did good that year. If I did do good, I kind of forget. But let's start looking at some more linebackers here. So we got Tremaine Edmonds, kind of had a down sophomore season last year with only solo tackles, but he did have 50 assists. So he's got 21 passes defense and 15 tackles for a loss in only 31 career games, which is Darius Leonard territory. For example, Joe Schubert has 35 combined passes defensed and tackles for a loss. So one less than Edmonds, but Schubert's played in just about twice as many games. And Schubert's one of the better linebackers as well. So the sky's the limit for Tremaine Edmonds. I think he's the perfect number 2 linebacker who has as much upside as anybody in this group to finish in the top 10 among linebackers. Devin White's the next guy, finished tied with Jalen Smith for 11th most average points per game, and most likely would have finished with a top 12 performance if he didn't miss 3 games. Plus, he was a rookie. You got Fred Warner from the same draft class as Leonard, Vander Esch, Roquan Smith, and Tremaine Edmonds. Warner had 85 and 89 solo tackles in his first 2 years, starting all 16 games both years. He had 3 sacks last year after none in his rookie year, and he also had a 46-yard pick six, so the dude can run. He can do it all, really. I would not be surprised if after the season we have all 5 of these guys from this draft class as the top 5 linebackers in the league. Looking the next guy, Zach Cunningham. He had 99 solo tackles, one short of that 100-yard mark last year, and 142 total. He was the 6th highest tackles per snap right now amongst linebackers. He is a 3-year vet now, but still a young guy playing in the AFC South. He should see plenty of opportunities to make some tackles. Then we got Devin Bush, probably the last of the young guys with the big potential. Bush had 1 forced and 4 recovered fumbles last year in his rookie year. He also defended 9 passes, so he's definitely got a nose for the ball. Only 72 solo tackles, though, so he's got to bring that number up. Then we're looking at these edge rusher players. So Shaq Thompson, Chandler Jones, TJ Watt, Khalil Mack, Shaquille Barrett, Von Miller. Once all the guys that we've mentioned have gone already, then I would start going for these guys. But if you're more of a, you want to just roll with those middle linebackers, don't forget about C.J. Mosley, Jordan Hicks, Demario Davis, and 2 honorable mentions here are as far as stashes go if you play in a dynasty league with IDP players. Patrick Queen and Isaiah Simmons. All of the scouts are saying that Isaiah Simmons is the next incredibly versatile defensive player. So go out and get him if you're playing in a dynasty IDP, because he looks like he's going to be one of the better players for a long time. All right, we only got a couple minutes left here. My bad for rambling about defensive tackles, but we got to get to safeties. Very important position here. So, yes, last year a corner finished as the top defensive back in Logan Ryan, but that was merely because of his 73 solo tackles and 4 interceptions, 2 stats I don't see him replicating this year. You want safeties in your defensive back spots, particularly strong safeties that play in the box against the run, but also cover and get you those passes defense and interceptions. The top 10 is pretty universal among the majority of fantasy sites. You got me and Rob's boy, Jamal Adams. As a Jets fan, I can attest to this. Jamal has been the best player on our team for years.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's biased to say it either. Budda Baker finished the number 2 defensive back last year and number 9 the year before that. He had 100 solo tackles last year, which puts him in an elite group of defensive backs. Landon Collins with Washington, top 10 in average fantasy points among defensive backs in each of the last 4 seasons, and top 20 in 2015. So he's been in the top 20 every year. John Johnson, who is actually not the only John Johnson to ever play in the NFL, by the way. He's going into his 4th year, and he should rack up tackles on that Rams defense. The tight end Arasa, Derwin James, probably the best free safety in football, in my opinion. He had 75 solo tackles in his his rookie year with 3 interceptions in 2018, but last year he missed 11 games with that foot injury. So hopefully he can come back and get back to that Pro Bowl level we saw in his rookie year. Keanu Neal, he's only played in 4 games in the last 2 seasons because of injuries. He's another guy kind of keeps getting hit by the injury bug. But when he does play, he's dominant. 155 solo tackles in those 2 seasons with 8 forced fumbles. If he falls anywhere past the number 7 overall defensive back, I think you should take him. Just hope that he stays healthy. Then we got Jordan Pryor up in Buffalo. He has 13 interceptions in his 7 years, in which he's only played 16 games in 2 of those 7 years. So if he had played all 16 games in all those years, he would have racked up interception numbers. He's a ball hawk. He's really good. Harrison Smith, he's finished as the number 7 defensive back in each of the last 3 seasons. So you want to talk about consistency, he's the man. Tracy Walker with Detroit, he had 82 solo tackles last year with 8 passes defense and 6 tackles for a loss in only 13 games. I can't wait to see what he does in a full season playing in the NFC North. And then we got Sean Williams with Cincinnati, back-to-back seasons with 80 solo tackles. He had a 5 interception season in 2018, and he could be a top tackler on the team with so many young guys playing on that defense in Cincinnati this year. So, Rob, what do you think of any of these top 10 guys? You think any of them don't belong in the top 10? You like any one of these any more than anybody else?
Well, I like Jamal Adams more than all of them. You know, I'll admit that as a Jet fan, whether that sounds biased or not, it probably is. They all deserve to be there, without a doubt. And I hope that the Jets could end this nonsense holdout situation with Jamal and get him signed. Pay the man. Pay him what he deserves. He's an excellent player. I mean, what kind of safety, will give you 6.5 sacks a year? From the safety spot. Guy nearly broke the record for defensive backs for safeties or for sacks in the season by defensive back.
Yeah, he's super versatile, man. He does everything. He's so much fun to watch too.
Absolutely. So I mean, that he's my standout as far as defensive backs go.
Yeah. I want to try and get through this next group of 10 these 10 safeties here. I have a lot more to say, but I'll kind of slim it down. So Jesse Bates, 145 solo tackles in his first 2 years, 16 passes defense and 6 interceptions. He's another ball hawk. Von Miller in Cincinnati. Yes, this is now 3 Cincinnati defensive backs. I think Von Miller might end up playing like a hybrid linebacker role that we kind of saw from Budda Baker last year, so it might be somebody to target late. Jabril Peppers with the Giants, coming out of Michigan. He was coined as the next uber versatile player, and he was someone that was involved in the trade with Odell Beckham Jr., so he's talented. Justin Simmons with Denver had 15 pass defense and 4 interceptions last year with 90-plus total tackles, so those are good numbers. Tyron Smith, it's kind of hard to believe the Honey Badgers going into his 8th season. He moved from free safety to strong safety 2 years ago and traded to Houston, and he stayed there for the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. 17 career interceptions, 61 career passes defensed. He is all over the field. Minkah Fitzpatrick with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh traded their first round pick last year to get this guy, so he's got some good value. Already has 5 interceptions, 2 of them returned for touchdowns, and 9 passes defense in his first 2 years. Then we got Kevin Byrd with Tennessee, 17 interceptions over 3 seasons with 60-plus solo tackles in each one. Justin Reed finished as the number 15 defensive back in 2018 with 10 points a game. So he could have another good year in 2020. He did have that 101-yard interception return for a touchdown, so he's athletic as hell. Tyler Rapp finished as the number 16 defensive back last year as a rookie. He had 2 interceptions and a return touchdown, 8 passes defense, 3 tackles for a loss, a forced fumble, and he had 100 total tackles. So he's another guy that racks him up. Malcolm Jenkins going back to New Orleans. He's averaged 70 solo tackles a season in his 6 straight years playing for Philadelphia. That's consistency if I've ever seen it. Like I said, he's back in New Orleans now, so I think he's got at least one more top 24 finish in him. Terrell Edmonds, Pittsburgh's other 23-year-old safety. Looks like him and Minkah Fitzpatrick are going to be rolling together for a long time. He only had 2 tackles for a loss and 3 passes defense last year, so if he can kind of replicate his 105 total tackle tackle numbers and kind of get his hands on more balls than more passes, then he should have a better season. And then Demarius Randall with Vegas had 3 straight years with 9 passes defensed and 11 interceptions in those 3 seasons, but he missed 9 games over that span. So if he can just play in a full 16-game season like he did, or he played in 15 games in 2018. He had 72 solo tackles, and he finished as the number 17 defensive back. So he's another guy you can probably get super late, and he will most likely finish as a top 24 defensive back if he finishes the whole season. I wouldn't draft any corners if you're playing in a DB IDP league, but if you have to play corners, look at Kyle Fuller, Marshawn Lattimore, Kareem Jackson, Marlon Humphrey, Stephon Gilmore, and Tre'Davious White. He is the man up there in Buffalo. So that is going to do it for the IDP episode. I feel like I had way too much to say, Rob. I'm so sorry. I feel like I didn't get you on as much as I wanted to, but we will for sure get you on another episode. Thank you so much for coming on and talking IDP with me.
Thank you for having me once again, man. It was fun. I'm looking forward to the next time I could be on.
I think next week we're going to be talking running back touchdown and tight end touchdown anytime scoring parlays on the FanDuel Sportsbook that I hit on a bunch of them last year, kind of came up with a theory. I'm going to share that with you guys. Maybe I can help you guys win some money. I won some money last year. It was a lot of fun. So that's what we're going to do next episode. But for now, again, thanks, Rob. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Play IDP. It's a lot of fun. And as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. For more great episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Kickin or Stickin is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. Kickin or Stickin is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gambling operates the National Problem Gambling Helpline Network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to play responsibly and always look for your man downfield.